Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Healing Conversations. My name is Einav Avni, and I am an energy healer and alignment coach. In this podcast, Healing Conversations for Anything Chronic is really here to bring the message of there is a possibility for alternative healing, for natural healing, for pain-free living, all of that. So today in the studio with me, I have someone I'm very excited to bring to you because Paula Smith, hello, by the way.
Hi.
She is going to talk to us about the inner child and how healing some of these wounds that we carry around with us, how they can help us heal who we are today. I'm not going to have the conversation myself, obviously, because otherwise I wouldn't need the guests. So let me introduce you to Paula. Paula, welcome. It is really lovely to have you here. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. I'm super excited about having the conversation. Um,
Wonderful.
yeah,
Yes. So,
I I totally believe in the power of using inner child healing to move these traumas through us to help with like chronic illness and other things. But yeah, it's a topic we're gonna go to today.
exactly. So let's really get started. Let just tell us anything about you. How did you get to what it is that you're doing today? A little bit about your background. Any
Sure,
way you want to start.
sure. So 4 years ago, I left a narcissistic abusive relationship that really took its toll on me. And I had no choice. I was doing healing before. I had started meditating for a couple of years before, which gave me the awareness and kind of started taking my power back. But when I left, that's when the true work came, because everything starts to come up, as you know, when you're on your healing journey. Once you put your toe in there, it just comes. And so I was meditating. I was looking into a bunch of different healing modalities. Like I was looking at attachment theory, all kinds of different things. I practiced mindfulness. That's a big part of my life.
Mm.
I had heard about inner child healing. I had even done some meditations, but I hadn't really seen how it was going to work for me yet. And then it kept coming back up. And so I looked into it a little bit further and it started resonating with me. What happened is I did one meditation and I was just like, wow, I saw how I could possibly start connecting. And it gave me the ability to go deeper in my healing. It was removing certain things like shame and stuff like that, where sometimes we don't want to look at certain things about ourselves. Like the fact when I realized I was a people pleaser, I didn't like that about myself. And it
Mm.
actually resisted, and it puts up resistance about like going further into that and looking at it. And for me, inner child healing took away those obstacles. And it was, I really, that's where I found myself. I started, when I got triggered, instead of being upset with myself, I started having compassion, because I was like, how could I be upset with this 3 or 4 year old girl inside me that's freaking out? And I
Mm.
started looking everything. I just saw it through a different lens. And yeah, I went there and I just totally embraced it. And now I show other people how it benefits them.
Mm. And you say such incredible things, already. Like, first of all, understanding and really knowing that there are different modalities and different things, and not all of them might work or be helpful in the same way.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like you say, you had this insight of what this could really do for you, and then embracing this. And I definitely want to hear more about that. And you mentioned people pleasing, which I think a lot of my viewers, listeners will definitely resonate with that. But maybe let's pause for a second, and let's go back into really what is inner child healing. What are these words that we hear a lot about, but how
I,
do we
I,
bring it from there to
I
here?
would say the couple of important pieces is it's the ability to connect with ourselves when maybe we've disconnected through our childhood in different places because of trauma. Every time that happens, we kind of like fracture from ourselves and separate and push those things down. The first 7 years of our lives, we're being programmed like subconsciously. So everything that happens, we're viewing it through our lens as a child, and we're basing our role in life, what gets us by, how we should be from that. And we don't know that we're still being run on those programs and beliefs and negative patterns as adults, but they're there. And with inner child healing, we can go back, we can sit with some of those triggers and those patterns and stuff that are coming up. We can finally like be brave enough to sit with them, feel them, and process them and start working with them and like moving the trauma through our body and releasing those patterns.
Definitely, of course, resonate with what you're saying, that yes, until age 7 we are like a sponge. We don't have our own opinions or understanding or decisions that we make, but we definitely create all of these coping mechanisms. And people pleasing, like you mentioned, is something that we pick up very early on. And we see that, yes, so when we do something nice, or when we do something that people are pleased with, then we get the attention we want. So these are definitely things that are subconscious. We don't know that we're doing them, but we're definitely creating them at such early age. And then we keep on going, right? Even in our adulthood, we are still using the same coping mechanisms and strategies that we created in childhood to help us move in life today. But it's only when we say, actually, why am I doing these things, that we can
The
really
why.
we say, okay, now let's go there. Let's really go and start digging. But what you're saying is that, why? I mean, what makes it scary? What I want to to make sure that we are all on the same page. So really, how do we start going back into this inner child walk? How do we learn to listen to it, to little us? How do we know actually, what is the question? What guides us on to making sure that when we've listened, we're actually getting better and we're not just doing more of what we've always done? Just some questions to put out.
No, I would say, like, for me, one of the first things that really started connecting me was some inner child healing meditations where I was visualizing myself as a child and going and like taking my hand and supporting myself. So we become the parent, when we decide we're going to do this, and I mean, the inner child healing gives us the ability to get curious, like I said, because we can remove the shame when we understand that we've been running on these programs. It's not our fault. Do you know what I mean? It's something that we developed at such a young age. And that gave me the ability to get brave, to sit, to look. And then I started doing these meditations, and that was when I really noticed I started bonding with myself. Certain things would come up. Like, another thing was I had an anxious attachment. And that was another place I had a lot of shame about. So I was like, why am I holding on to these people and these things? Starting to have the awareness that it was unhealthy. But I was like putting the blame and the shame on myself for having these things come up. Right. And like I said, when I imagined, I visualized that inner child, and I started reparenting. So I started making it and saying things to myself and saying things to my inner child, like, I've got you now. You know what I mean? You don't have to carry this anymore. And it's a little bit unusual at first, but it's, kind of like affirmations. It's something that as you do, you get comfortable, and you can form a bond by, when things come up, those feelings, instead of, it all being in our head and getting triggered, try to stop and visualize, whoever as a child comes up in your head. Maybe it's a 7-year-old version, maybe it's a 13-year-old version, whoever that is, and try to visual them struggling. And you can gain compassion through that practice.
That's a really interesting way of approaching this, really. I guess from conversations I've had with people, and so first of all, there's some people that says, I don't remember who I was. I don't remember anything about my childhood. There's people, of course, that have been through a lot. Yeah. So really, currently they don't remember. They don't have this ability to bring up this little kid that they were, and so that, I guess, that's the first question. Maybe we'll start there.
So then, for what I recommend, and because I had to do this a lot, and some of the memories started coming with that, but it's sitting with the feelings when they come up. So you may not remember, but so you're having a moment when you're triggered. It's the practice of taking the time and not ignoring anymore, getting brave, sitting, feeling it. We don't necessarily have to know where the feeling is coming from to feel the feeling. Every time we sit and we actually feel it and process it, every time we do that, we are moving it through us and we are doing healing. We're moving trauma through us. So that's a big part of it, is just the feeling and finally getting brave and making the connection that it's coming from our past and from our childhood. We don't have to remember the exact situation.
Because when you say that, the thing that comes up for me is all of a sudden this feeling of, really, actually there's the feeling of a lot of sadness, like things were done, things were said, things were, really the reality. And there's no, in some places, yes, of course you can blame, but I'm not talking about blame. I'm talking about, normal happening in every family, in every really childhood. There's always pain. There is always something that is really, challenging for the child. But when you mentioned these things, it was interesting for me that there's a lot of sadness that comes up, and I understand why you're saying that you need to be brave and sit with the feelings, because it feels like the easiest thing to do is really to just run away or to push them as far back as possible.
Probably what we've done our whole lives, right? That was what I did. The act of sitting with, like, I do call it courageous and brave, because for myself, I had never done it before. It was so unnatural and it felt so, it was difficult. So it is, helpful to have support, coaches or therapists or counselors to touch base with while you're going through this, because when stuff starts coming up, it starts coming up. We don't get to say, whoa, no more. I don't want to do this anymore. Like, when you start on the healing journey, I find, you know what I mean? It's like you open the floodgates.
Yeah. And yeah, I think that's something that we definitely run away from most of our lives. And especially, how do you tell yourself that this is now actually that you are safe now, even though you are an adult, and you're not no longer maybe even with the people that were there when you were a child.
Yeah. Like I said, it's like reparenting and having those conversations with yourself, or just kind of even in your head, repeating certain things. I just created an inner child healing meditation where you actually go back and, we meet our inner child and we tell them we're going to be there, and we, kind of like carry on and take them out of the situation and reassure them and stuff. So I think it's practices like that can help.
Yeah, it definitely sounds very.
When we start abandoning ourselves as adults, and you make that deal with yourself, like, that was something I told my inner child, like, I'm not going to abandon you anymore. I'm going to be there. I'm not going to keep turning away from you, because every time we abandon ourselves, we are turning away from an inner child. Like, when they're freaking out and stuff, they're looking for us. They're still looking for someone to parent them and be there for them and support them.
It's interesting again, because the word abandoning, it means that there is some intentional action. But I think that when we run away from our feelings, it's not necessarily abandoning. It's really, we always do what we feel is best for us at this very moment, right? And if I'm thinking, I'm noticing something about myself, and I now need to sit with it, and actually it's not the right time, it's not the right place, and I'd rather just shove it in another corner like I've done forever. Right. I don't know if I'm abandoning. I'm just probably trying to underneath the surface, just just staying afloat for a little bit longer.
But I think what it's doing is it's bringing up the same thing for the inner child. You know what I mean? The inner child, I think, still sees it the same way.
Yeah. So I want to go back to that definition of the inner child. The inner child is really, it's our younger self. It really is us up to around age 7, when we start making different sense of the world, when parts of our brains are starting to be more connected, and we can start making sense of relationship between situations, cause and effect, and all of that. And this child is still dictating our behavior, our responses, our reactions to the world, and all the way to however old we are right now. Is that a fair way of saying it?
No, Totally. That's a very good description of it. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So then when we basically saying actually the questions, right? Why am I doing things the way I am? Why am I having these patterns, maybe with relationships, maybe with anything else really in life?
Self-sabotage or whatever in jobs, and there's so many different places where it shows up. Yeah.
Right. So for you, would you say that the first place to look is really your relationship with the inner child?
Yeah, I would say, because like that was the other thing, is I had no idea when I started this journey how much of our things it was affecting. And so self-sabotage, our inner voice, our inner critic comes from like usually comes from our parents. So like however they spoke to us or whatever, we don't know it. But if you actually start like tuning into yourself and how you're like talking to yourself, that's
Mm.
amazing. You know what I mean? If you like, so it's, yeah, it's asking yourself the whys, and it's slowing down enough so that you can tune in and sit with yourself.
I think it is really interesting because a lot of the time I work a lot with people with a negative voice and all of that,
Mm-hmm.
and I say, okay, so what is the characteristics? Is it young? Is it old? Is it what is it? Is it male? Male, female, and a little bit too often, I guess it's always oh yeah, it's my mother. People say it so often, and then I'm thinking about my kids. Damn
That's the thing, right? Then we have to do that reflecting if we're, have our kids already.
it. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But yeah, so it is really interesting when people recognize that the negative voice does come from what they're used to.
Mm-hmm.
But how are we making this connection? So here I am, and say I get triggered. I go to the office and something happens, and I'm like, "Argh." I'm just thinking about my estate agent that I was talking to today. Yes, I'm already triggered. Okay, so so if I'm doing the right, if I'm on that inner child journey,
Right.
maybe I want to sit with it, right? I want to see actually how come I am responding in the way that I am.
Mm-hmm. Is it
What
something that it shows up for me a lot? Like think of, is this something that it's like a regular pattern with myself? Sit with it, look back, and then maybe look back into your childhood and think of when that feeling feels familiar. See if you can like trace it. If you can't trace it, like I said, sometimes we can't trace it back, but we can, instead of, like I said, looking away, burying it, we can sit with it and think about our inner child and just think about being there and supporting it. You know, think about it maybe sitting in your heart and just kind of doing some breathings and breathe through the emotions that are coming up and let them come up.
Okay, so I'm taking this on. I'm doing it. I'm with you there. So I'm thinking about how I got triggered by my estate agent, and then I'm thinking, okay, so is this familiar? Yeah, I can probably say that I have a pattern in the way that I respond to things, and to my credit, I didn't lose it.
There you go.
I didn't
I'm
lose it,
clapping for
but
you over here.
I didn't lose it, but it definitely, yes, it was definitely impactful. So if I'm thinking about it, yes, I guess that immediately I am taken back to a time in my childhood where similar things where I wanted to express myself and couldn't. There was the other person was not listening, was not even acknowledging me enough to take my opinion on board. So okay, so I've made the connection. How do I? What is my next step to doing to start with the healing, other than just recognizing, where maybe it just came from?
No, it's good. The recognizing is huge, and sitting with that. And then the next thing is like asking yourself, like in your everyday life, is this something that comes up, and are you brave enough to speak up? Like I have clients where that will be a practice. That will be the first tool that, if they tell me like what your situation is. So their practice is to start with people that are safe around them, really practicing on showing up and speaking their truth and voicing what they need to. And just it's a practice right there, because that can be a really uncomfortable thing if that's not something you've done, and if that's been like crushed down in you. That
Mm.
practice right there is something that can be a huge thing. and then expand it. Like I recommend, like, you know what I mean? Sometimes it's not easy to just start with everybody in this world, like, you know, a real estate agent or something like that. But if you have a partner that's safe, or if you have a friend, it just depends on the dynamics. Really starting to think about and sit with when you don't show up for yourself is a practice that I recommend to people.
So, so basically, what you're saying is that you wanna start with whatever is coming up for you right now, whatever the
Mm-hmm.
trigger is. You then want to say, actually, yes, where is this coming from? And you know, sooner or later, something probably from childhood before age 7 will come up. And then you want to say, okay, I'm not pushing it away. I'm not running away from it. I want to see what it was, and also what maybe something that I can do now to correct it, to start doing things maybe with this kind of affirmation, like you said, or maybe with
Mm-hmm.
actual actions, like talking with people, or finding your new way.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I mean, it sounds to me. I mean, I like that there are some concrete steps, but what are the feelers? What are the steps in between that people struggle with when they come to do this work?
What do they struggle with? I think a lot of one of the big things we struggle with is the biggest part is the sitting with and the feeling and letting it come up. I would say that's the hardest part for people, is that initial step of stopping when the trigger is there. We're so used to just running through those triggers and them running us. It's the
Mm,
action of stopping and sitting, I would say, is the biggest thing. Once people give themselves permission and see that that is going to get them somewhere, maybe they do it once and they realize that, yes, it's uncomfortable, but they saw that what happened when they did that, that it gave them that space. It's like an elastic band. You know what I mean? It's like you're stretching it and you're giving yourself that space in those situations, so you're not always snapping. You're giving yourself some elasticity there. And every time we do it, every time we speak up after, every time we sit with it, it's, you know, we're growing. And it's amazing what comes from that, just those practices. The sitting with it is, I would say, the really important piece, and the reparenting, the affirmate, the talking to yourself, comforting yourself, telling
but
yourself you're going to be there.
how? Because I'm thinking to some of my clients, to some of just things that come up when you're saying these things, and I can see, like what you said, right? You took it on yourself, so it
Mm-hmm.
feels like it's so easy to find yourself back in that little you situation, and feel the feelings actually of, yes, maybe it was my fault, or maybe, you know, I took it on myself, or maybe actually noticing that I was too small to notice or to do anything better.
Right.
And it feels like there's going to be so much pain that is coming from unveiling these moments. And of course, as children, we're there every day, right? We have tons of memories like this that are very
Mm-hmm.
much hidden and buried, I should say. um, but what do I say to myself if I witness little me, you know, the struggle, the you know, trying to keep myself together, to really trying to survive. How?
Honestly, what would you say to your 4-year-old child? Like, if you have children now, what would you say to them? Like, I'm here for you now. You don't have to do this on your own. I support you. I've got you now. I'm not going to leave you sitting in this on your own. You know, picture hugging. It's, for me, that's what I do now. Like, I think of how I would speak to my children when they were little, you
Mm.
know, and speak to myself that way. And like, you don't have to speak it out loud, but it's, you know, if you're into just it's, even if it's just like visualizing.
And what about, you know, maybe one of these memories come up, and you recognize that a certain person that has been in your life, and I know that some people, of course, have severe traumas from the childhood, and some people maybe not so severe, but say they recognize that there is a person that back then was very toxic, very, you know, unhelpful, very, I don't know, influential negatively. and this person is still around, and all of a sudden, now that you're able to go back to these moments, anger and resentment and fear maybe come up. What do we do? How do we
I
help
like
us?
this question. I like this question because this is stuff that came up for me. And until I exactly knew how, because I mean, we can get really raw when we're doing this because
Mm,
it's like we're removing some of those layers and that protection that we've had. And so I found myself in that position a lot. And one of the first things I do or say is give yourself permission to like create space if you need to. You don't have to keep putting yourself, especially while you're going through this, right back in it. So if you need to set boundaries, set boundaries. It's something you can deal with later. You can decide if it's something that, you know what I mean, you want to have contact or whatever. But I would say, because this might be the first time in your life that you've set that boundary and said, you know what I mean, it's not the best thing for me. And that's part of healing your inner child, is showing up for yourself, reparenting, and making those decisions for yourself. So it's using that voice, it's speaking up, it's setting boundaries. And that can be hard, especially with family and stuff like that, because they're not always, when you start showing up as a different version of yourself, it's uncomfortable for them because they're like, who is this? What is going on? So it's, like I said, it's not the easiest task. I'm not telling anyone that it's the easiest thing, but I would say like it's a profound thing, the shifts
yeah,
that happen, for sure.
yeah. No, I'm with you on the profound how profound it is. I wanna move a little bit onto the topic of chronic conditions and stuff, because we always I always say, the other people that always say, that really a lot of our chronic conditions, they come because of suppressed emotions, because we don't want to do it. We know that it's too scary, it's too painful, it's too big, and really we brush it to one side and we say, "Ah, I'll be fine," or "It's better if I don't touch it," and we move away. Um, but then at some point the body says, enough. I can't take all
Yeah.
of this running away anymore. We do need to do something. How are we bringing this conversation forward to really help people acknowledge that emotions, and they're probably scarier hidden than they are experienced or spoken about.
Well, that's the thing. Every time we're pushing down these emotions, if we've done it our whole life, it will start to show up. It's trauma, and trauma, it can't stay buried in our bodies forever. And it's sneaky how it shows up. It can take us a long time to figure out what's going on. But every time, we sit with our inner child, we heal and we move one of those emotions through us. Every time we do it, we are releasing those trauma and moving it through us. Like I said, it's a silent, it sits there and sits there until it's not going to sit there anymore, and
Mm,
shows up in, like, so many different ways when it comes to like chronic illness and stuff like that.
yeah. So when you say, I mean, you sit with it, and you find out maybe what is the emotion. You find out maybe what is the event where something came up. Maybe you have the meditation. Maybe you have the breathing. Is there
Feeling it.
any
It's the feeling. I would say, you hear about feeling it to healing it.
yeah.
It's the allowing yourself to feel it. It's huge.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, why would I?
Because you understand, I mean, you get to choose between your chronic illness or the pain of sitting with something for 10 minutes or half a day, depending on how it wants to come up, you
So I have
know?
a client, for example, and they know that their chronic pain is definitely emotional and not structural. So
Mhm.
so they are very much aware, um, but they are not. They I guess they don't have the tools. So even though that they know it's emotional, they don't have the tools to say, actually, how is a change or an increase in my pain levels means that I should go back and release some emotions, rather than maybe choose a different chair to sit on, or a different kind of
Mhm.
couch to lie on. So I think that's what a lot of people do, is that when they experience the pain, they're looking for the physical thing that they can do, instead of recognizing that actually it really is about the emotions, and the really what we're saying here is about starting to heal the inner child, because without it, we're going to always be in this exactly where we've always been, basically.
I know. It's like when I was in my relationship, I was taking so many different like anxiety and antidepressants for years. Like I think I was on like 8 or 9 different ones, and
Mm.
with no success, right? Like I might feel like they were helping me for a month or so, whether that was placebo or not. Um, and it's funny because I remember at one point saying to my doctor, I'm starting to have some memories come up from childhood. And very quickly, she got a look on her face, almost like she was terrified, like I triggered and brought something up in her. And she said, do not open Pandora's box. So that was
Oh.
like my doctor's advice. You know, when I look back at the time, I was like, I thought it was kind of unusual because I could see that she was like, she got upset, like I brought something up from her past or whatever.
Mm.
So to be shut down. So, I mean, that's a little bit of like our everyday society. I'm not saying every doctor would say that, but I mean, it shows you
Mm.
right there why people are, you know, afraid and not shown like, why didn't she, there's so many different things she could have said to me in that moment. Right.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
but yeah, I mean, there has to be a release. It's the trauma is trapped in our body, and we have to make a decision how we want to live the rest of our lives, and we have to decide, you know what I mean, what we're willing to go through. You know, temporary pain of feeling for, you know, getting rid of permanent chronic illness.
Mm.
You know.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's exactly the thing. It just that it is really interesting for me. So if someone is listening and they're saying, okay, yes, maybe I have heard about the mind body connection, and I recognize that maybe my troubles are not structural, but they are chronic, they are emotional.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, when we say emotional, we don't say that they've invented it or that it doesn't exist. We just say that the cause is really that the body can't deal with all of these emotions anymore. It can't deal with this continuous stress and trauma that we keep inside of us, and maybe recycle. So according to you, how do we, and maybe these people hearing it saying, okay, I'm going to try it. So what are some things that we recommend, how to get this process started, in your opinion, or in your the way that you work with your clients?
Getting brave, and when this like when you feel yourself getting triggered over a situation, I say, you know, triggers are not a negative, they can be a blessing. They are our guide to, you know, what is really trying to show up for ourselves. So I would say that the first step is getting brave enough to start sitting with the triggers, you know, taking the time when they come up, getting brave and say, this time, as uncomfortable as it is to stop, and not push through it, not react, not get busy, not do the thing that I always do, but to sit and feel it and start processing and asking yourself questions. You know, like, do I recognize this feeling? Is this something that comes up a lot? Do I, you know, what is going on in that moment that could be triggering that? Like, you know, asking yourself questions. Is it something that showed up as like, is it can I relate it to my childhood? You know, is there something that, you know, I was ashamed of, or I was told not to speak up of, or, you know, from your childhood, from your parents or teachers? That's the thing. It doesn't have to just be parents. There's so many different situations that could cause wounding.
Yeah, I mean, it is, to me, it's so interesting, because that's what I say to my clients a lot. I say, if you notice that there is a change in your pain, or maybe the location of the pain, that's something that is very common with a mind body connection type pain. I ask these questions, like, what happened recently that I got angry or
Mhm,
triggered or upset, or who said something, or basically, I see all of these things as we are on automat all the time, and
mhm,
we no longer recognize what triggers us. So we get it from, external environments, or of course maybe it's internal one, but there is a trigger, and we just we continue right past it. and we don't sit with it, and we don't pause with it, and we don't recognize what it is. And yet sometimes people say, oh, I have this really heavy feeling, I don't know what it is. And it's like, okay, so let's start digging. And sometimes they just say, well, no, that's too much.
Well, I mean, so that's the other piece in it. And it's that, a lot of the times we can only plant seeds. We can't, people have to be ready for this work because it's not for the faint of heart. You know what I mean? Like there's been people, I wouldn't say clients. My clients are usually, because they know what I do, when they come to me, I haven't met anyone that's not ready. When they come, they're ready to sit with it and they understand the work that we're going to do. But when it comes to other people in my life that I see the resistance to it. And I can see that I can't force them. And that it's not my job to, you know what I mean? We can plant seeds.
Yeah.
We can, and we can set examples. Like that's a big part of me, is like for my family and my kids and stuff like that. I'm always trying to set an example, but it can be hard if someone is not ready to tell them, you know what I mean, to sit with it and if they can't recognize where it's coming, that's a really hard one to help people with. They have to be open to it.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that. It's yeah, they have to be ready. Otherwise, there's a lot of anger that is coming out. It's very,
And the
it's very,
resistance, right? So
yeah.
resistant. Yeah.
So my next question is really about: do we need to know the trauma that started everything, in order to be able to start this inner child healing?
No, I don't believe so, because I didn't know what the things were. It wasn't until I started learning more and sitting and trying, seeing what was coming up for me, the feeling wise, that I was able to start some of the connections. I started more just sitting with the feelings that I was having. So it's sitting with the feelings that you're having and your triggers and your emotions and doing that. Because like I said, the feeling is the healing. That's what's going to get things moving for you. It's reparenting. You don't need to know what happened to yourself to be there for yourself now. Right?
So in terms of reparenting, it really is that thing of, I'm going to be the adult that maybe you didn't have when this was going on. I will look after you. I will take care of you.
Yeah.
Like you said, I'm not going anywhere. So I have a client, and he has he knows that loud noise really triggers him. And just today he said it's probably started when I was a child, and there was a lot of arguments in the family that was going on. How can we help him, for example, to really start looking into all of this, and really, are we expecting that if he does more of the inner child healing and sitting with the emotions and all of that, will the triggering to loud noise, will that ease?
I'm curious about that one. That's not something, you know what I mean? Like I can see how that would cause, it could be even before he has a memory, right? Like it could have happened so young. Yeah, I don't know. I guess it would be, my first thing would be to ask what happens when he sits with it, when it comes up. Like what feelings are coming up. And because does he have the capability of doing that, sitting with himself when the triggers and the uncomfortableness first show up?
I think that causes just a lot of anxiety and feeling unsettled, and then actually just wanting to change environment, or move, go
I would
away.
maybe suggest some like breath work and meditation too, then, to ease through those periods, to maybe that be what could give him the ability to sit with it.
Yes, it is really interesting, because yes, I mean, I'm totally with it, that there's so many things that we do or experience today that have really started in childhood, and we didn't make a connection, and we are still responding to that, and it's still so automatic and so hidden that it's a lot of it really does need a lot of dedication, or even, like we said, the decision to say, actually, I am going to get to the root of that. I'm not going to just do whatever I'm always done, or do as I've always done. So share with me, if you can, some success stories, or case studies that you had where doing the inner child walk help people to
Sure.
release or change their chronic conditions, or how they were feeling.
I could think of one situation, and the client, even with myself, she had a hard time like speaking up her needs. Like, even if, she told me right off the bat, she trusted me, like we formed a connection right away, but she had a hard time. She had a hard time speaking her needs somewhere in her life. I think things were traumatic in her childhood and stuff. And she got the idea that she wasn't important enough to speak her truth. She's kind of like squashed down. And so, like I said, I set her up with the practice. She is lucky enough to have a really safe partner. Like, that's like her safest person in her life. And because she, even with him, even though he would tell her he wants her to express herself, she still wouldn't do it. And she would wait until things were, you know what I mean, to the point to where you're like bubbling kind of thing.
Yeah,
So
exploding.
yeah. So I just gave her the practice, of just at first just trying to with him. And I said, don't even try to do it every time. When you have the space, because you know how uncomfortable it is when you're feeling that, she wants to speak up, but the fear comes. She feels squashed. And so she started doing it, and she said it was amazing because, for one thing, it started giving him the permission to speak up with her. All of a sudden, when he saw, so it like opened communication between them. And then she happened to have a trip planned where she was going to have to go back to her family. So we did a couple sessions about like how to prepare yourself to throw yourself, because I mean, that's when it really shows up for her, right? Like, and she's right in this, this feeling of, you're a crab without your shell. Like, she's feeling raw right now. We're right in the middle of practicing all this, and she can't just go home. Like, she's across the country. And before she knows it, like, she did way better than she thought. She was able to express her needs when she went back home. And I was a little concerned for her because I know what it's like to throw yourself back in family, but she did way better than I could have even imagined. And she had other things come up that even made it more complicated. And she still did amazing. So that's like, but one of the things I do is when I'm working with my clients, I don't just give them these practices and stuff and say, I'll talk to you in 2 weeks. Because of we're doing such deep work, I do like, I would say like unlimiting texting. Like, you know what I mean? They're always able to check in with me. And if I'm thinking about them for some reason, if I'm very intuitive, so if I'm thinking about them, sometimes, like I'll reach out and check on them because I'm like, I've thought about that person a couple times today. And if I know, I mean, I remember what it's like to be in the thick of it. Right.
Yeah,
so
lovely.
I always leave communication open, because that's the thing, is we never know when something big's going to come up.
Yeah, I always say that. Yeah, healing is not just not dedicated for the session, right? It can happen anytime, any day. And yes, so therefore the doors are open. It's nearly time for us to say goodbye, but I have just one more question, actually, and it's something that I know that has come up a lot in conversation that I've been having with people, and this is really about the connection between the inner child and weight loss. And the feeling of safety or not safety, or what can you tell us about that?
It's not something I've explored a lot, but I mean, yes, it's a protection, right? It's a protection to keep ourselves, I guess, hidden, small, not accessible, kind of like. And yeah, I guess if what you're looking for is advice for someone that was like going through that, I would say, it's sitting with that and thinking about, how you came up with that idea. Like, if you realize that is where it comes from and stems from. I would think back to, maybe start thinking back to childhood when maybe you developed that habit, or where in your life that started too. Because when it started is probably, you know what I mean? And when you do it, that's the other thing, is when those things come up and you have that kind of knee-jerk reaction to soothe yourself with food and stuff like that, is sitting with like what's going on right now.
I think that's a really good reminder, actually. It's about having all of these hidden conversations that we have with ourselves, or like you say, the knee-jerk reaction, or need to soothe, or something, is to really be able to pause for a second and say, first of all, what's going on, and second thing, if you start bringing up the inner child, like you say, and imagining. I was reading it with, can't remember his name, that he's doing in a positive intelligence guy, and he's talking about, try to imagine your opponent as a little child.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, this is what you were saying about ourselves. Remind yourself of what little you is, what they're going through, what they look like. If you really bring that into your conscious awareness at the time of conflict or triggering, or something like this, then that will help you to start treating yourself, with more kindness, with more compassion.
So much more.
Yeah.
Self-love was cringy to me for up until, like, honestly, my 40s. If it's not something that's modeled for you, it's a big thing to wrap the head around when you grow up with people that abandon themselves for people, or whether we've shown that that's selfish. Maybe our parents told us, not to take that time, like that we weren't supposed to focus on ourselves. There's different reasons why we're so resistant to us, but we deserve it. I mean, we were put on this earth for a reason. It wasn't to live other people's lives. And, when we realize that it's for us.
And when your inner child is healed, what is the difference? What do you see differently?
For
Then.
myself, I finally felt whole. I know I've always been whole. Like, you know what I mean? I'm a person, and it's only like beliefs and stuff that made me feel different. But the best way I can describe it is, I didn't even realize until it disappeared what it was. But all my life, I felt like I was carrying, it was like there was like a hole in me and I didn't realize it. And I was trying to fill it with different things, by holding on to things, by, working too hard with like my career, with holding on to unhealthy relationships, by overgiving, by people pleasing, and all these things. And when I did the inner child work, it was like, I could tell you in that moment, the moment that it went away. And it was like, I finally found that puzzle piece and it went back in, and it was like, the hole was filled, but the heaviness just went away. And I just, like, I am light, and that's the best way I can explain it, is like wholeness and lightness. You're not dragging around all of that stuff that you've been dragging around your whole life. You're not carrying everything. It's like you're able to put it down. Freedom.
It sounds awesome. It sounds awesome. And really, Paula, thank you so much for being here with us today, and sharing a little bit about your journey, and really helping people to put the pieces together, to understand some things that they can already do, and some things that they can already think about. And of course, I will have all of your information in the show notes, so people are very encouraged and welcome to get in touch. And if that resonates, do what they need to do. But thank you very much for being here with us today.
I love the conversation. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.